Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome back to our show, Have Your Say. And we're continuing on the topic that we left off from before, racism. And we have our same wonderful guest here, Brother Musas, here with us once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
So, as I mentioned to the people, Akhi, this is a very vast subject. It's something that we can't sweep it under the rug.
No, we can't.
We got to allow things to come out.
That's it.
We got to speak about certain issues so that we don't feel like we're oppressing nobody.
Of course.
So let's touch down on some of these things, and inshallah, towards the end, try to give some solutions.
Of course. Well, as we was talking about before, in terms of the communities and how we've allowed racism to kind of infiltrate our own community, and we've allowed it to the detriment of our community to affect us in terms of how we're picking the schools for our children, in terms of the places we want to eat, in terms of the environments we want to work in terms of the mosques we want to pray in. It's become a big problem because within all of these environments and all of these sectors and public places that we want to be, these are all run by Muslims. So we shouldn't be really picking places that we eat, sit, pray and study on the basis of colour and race, when we've already established that this is a place of Islam that, is upon Quran and Sunnah. But nevertheless, this is our situation, this is our reality, and this is what's happening. On top of that, we find coming from the revert community ourselves, that we face many obstacles as a revert community and also as a black community. But on top of that, with, speaking and spending many times with our brothers also from the revert communities that may be from the white community, they feel like some of the biggest obstacles they have to face is to validate their Islam. Are they really Muslims? And this is something for somebody that has left a way of life of kufr, and the things that you've had to leave behind. As we say that some people lose everything to accept Islam, while others, give up everything to go into a life that we left, is that when you lose that connection with your family members, with the people that you spent most of your life with, because you've embraced Islam and you've stated those words, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, to then have a community of people tell you that you're not really Muslim, and that
that's a hurtful feeling.
It's a hurtful thing, and on the basis of your skin color, nothing other than that, on the basis that you are white and we don't believe that you really believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not on the basis of any actions that you did. And even on top of that, we know that hypocrisy is something which lies in the heart. We'll never know. But just on the basis of how a person sees you, sometimes brothers said that they've gone to massages and they're praying, and after the prayer, one of the people in the masjid will ask them, are you Muslim? And the man's thinking, I've just prayed with you. What else am I doing in the masjid? To the point that these questions have been asked to people in Mecca, in Medina, are you Muslim? And they're thinking, what else am I doing here? So we feel like this shows you the level that racism has really, infiltrated our community, and to the effect that it has, that many people, whether it be right or wrong, have apostated from Islam on the basis that racism took them away from Islam.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, as I shared with you previously, there's situations where I know of personally, situations where brothers have told me when they go into certain masajid in America, they feel uncomfortable. They are white skinned. They may go into a masjid that's predominantly black, and they may not get the issue of someone thinking they're an agent. They get the issue of, what are you doing here? Especially a masjid where it's predominantly African American, for example. You have white brothers that feel uncomfortable going to this masjid, or white sisters that may feel uncomfortable going to that masjid. This is a big issue.
And it's a big issue because we haven't spoke about, as a man, sometimes the men are more forthcoming and are also more prone to be defensive and ready to protect their honor, their stance and what they believe in. But when you think about the women, that come from that community, especially the white sisters, that come into that community and they want to marry, they want to go into certain masajids, they want to enter certain communities, that essence of them being white and being of white skin is a big problem. It's led to many issues that we face as a youth organisation, dealing with youth that are going through many domestic issues on the basis of a wide variety of issues. But one of them is that being undervalued because they're white. That being underappreciated because they're white. And that falls into a racial issue. It falls into that time of we're better than you because we're this colour and you're that colour. And I feel, again, the only way we're going to deal with these issues is really looking how did the early generation of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how did they tackle these issues? How did they deal with companions from Rome, from Africa, from Arabia, from different parts of the world coming together, defending the honour of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and giving this call of Islam, vast and wide. How were they able to come together? A nation, the Sahaba were a nation of different men and women, and they were able to propagate this religion to the point that we can sit here comfortably, uttering these words of Shahada and having our deen, preserved in hadith and stuff like that, through the works. When we look at the 7 books of hadith, from At-Tirmidhi, Dawood and Sahih Muslim and Bukhari, and we find that many of these, they weren't Arabs, We find that they were non-Arabs, those that preserved. And when we look at from the contemporary scholars of our times, from one of the greatest muhaddiths that we've had, Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah, we find that he was a non-Arab, and we find that Allah has preserved this religion of the hadith through many non-Arabs, that have brought us these books of hadith, and like I say, the 2 most famous ones that we can name is Muslim and Bukhari, that were not Arabs, but they're the ones that we always use as a source of reference to identify who was the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how did he live, how did he deal with certain issues, where the sources of reference that we're going to are to 2 tremendous scholars of Islam who are non-Arabs. To show that
Abu Hanifa,
to show Persian. To show that this issue that we have made such a problem in our religion could not have been preserved for us if it wasn't for all these types of nations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used in His wisdom to preserve this deen for us.
And I find it very strange that we as Muslims, we have one of the most beautiful verses in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where He mentions in translation that He has made many of us, He's made us from a single male and a female, and has made us into many nations and tribes, not so that we may hate each other, but so that you may know each other. This is deep. And the most righteous, the best amongst us, are those that are the most righteous, those that are most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will find this nowhere, in no other books, no other religious texts can you probably look and find an ayah, a verse like this. And this is something amazing. So when we have something so beautiful like this, I find it very amazing that we can go to these extremes. We can belittle, because we don't realize how much we are belittling ourselves. Even if you are as an individual, if you say, I'm not good enough, my skin is not dark enough, my skin is not white enough, to the point you want to go and put creams on your face to make you look whiter, or you want to go tan your skin to make you look darker, even though it's causing you problems. These things cause diseases. So we need to be, how can I say this? We need to be proud, happy, not proud in the arrogant way, but happy that Allah Ta'ala created us the way we are. Because, if we look at racism, this is one of the most foolish things, because you don't have a choice with the bee when you're born. You don't have a choice. You understand? We had a choice to be a Muslim. So if anything, we should be, subhanAllah, feel like we're, extremely proud about is being a Muslim. You had a choice in the say. And Allah Ta'ala chose us to be Muslims, subhanAllah.
SubhanAllah, it's true. It's true, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He created us in the best image and the best of creation. And Allah says that when He creates, it's the best of creation. So knowing that every single person was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that which Allah creates is the best of creation in the best of manner, then we don't have an argument. We don't have a leg to stand on. But again, it shows that all types of disobedience that, individuals have is always to this attachment to the dunya. And without a shadow of a doubt, like you said, depending on in where you are in your life in what time in your life you're in. It's either you're trying to be lighter or you're trying to be darker. So it shows that it's not a one-way game. People are unhappy with their skin colors and who they are. It's not a one-way thing. So you find that people are generally unhappy, and to have this sense of happiness is to belittle something that someone else has that they don't. Is to say that I'm better than you because you're black, or I'm better than you because I'm white, because they know that this is who I am, this is something that maybe I have you can't attain. And people are always trying to find a way to make themselves feel better. Because if you're black, you're black, and if you're white, you're white. And there's some things that money can't buy. So people feel like maybe this is a way for me to put a person down and to put myself up. Right. But you find that most of the time when individuals are not happy with themselves, then generally they won't be happy with other people.
Absolutely, that's a good point.
But we find that in terms of dealing with us as a Muslim community, this is not the only topic that we're going to touch on in terms of it being a problem, but every solution that we have has to go back to the authentic sources of the Quran and Sunnah.
Absolutely.
We have to go back in terms of understanding it, not just something that we read in the books and we put behind us. It's not a fairy tale. They're not some stories that are made up. These are real lives that were lived and that were led for us to also follow and to set examples. It's not just fairy tale stories that we hear about how the companions were and how they treated each other, to the point that, you know, that we just throw it over our heads when we hear that the Muhajirun, when they went to Medina and they met the Ansar, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made it his mission that he grabbed one Ansari and one Muhajirun and he put them together and said, you lot are brothers. He didn't allow the Muhajirun to stay there and the Ansar to stay there. He made sure that he connected one from one. He said, you two look after each other.
And who can make this claim about their religion?
And that's it.
And this is one of the things, wallahi, and I've mentioned this many times when I'm speaking about my particular experience before I was a Muslim. One of the things that really shocked me and amazed me of when I entered into a masjid is that I saw about 20 different nationalities. Because this is the problem that I had in America. I don't know if the problem exists here in the UK, that when I go to church, when I used to go to attend church, all I saw were black faces. I had a problem with this as a child coming up. I had a problem. My thing was, okay, what about the white people? What about the Asians? You know, who do they worship? Aren't they good enough to be in the same place with us? Or sometimes you may feel, you know, that you are a lowly people. You understand that they're worshiping somebody else and we can't be in the same place together. This is a problem. So when I saw people from all different races and colors being together under one umbrella, worshiping the Creator, you understand, without saying, you know, he's black, he's white, the Creator's black, he's white, he's Spanish, whatever it may be. Because I understood these things early, that this was plain racism that I saw. And this was a way of people colonizing other people.
Yeah, I feel that's true, and I feel that within the community, you find that racism is something which is self-taught. You know, a lot of us, you know, experienced it, and sometimes it's that some of it is taught. You know, some people pass racism on to their children, and some people, due to experiencing racism, become racist themselves. I would say before Islam, I was that individual, that I grew up in predominantly white schools, and growing up, going through certain racist situations made me then identify, going into high school, the black kids and rolling with the black kids and forming an identity that made us racist, not verbally, but by action. If you wasn't white, we didn't care about your lives. If you wasn't,
so it was a reaction.
It's a reaction. So if you're white, you're not black, we don't care about you. You're Asian, you're not black, we don't care about you. We don't rate you, we don't respect you, your issues don't concern us.
I remember even brother from Pakistan was telling me the other day some of the racial tension that they used to experience here in regards to him being called Paki by you know, certain white groups and things of this nature. So I want to touch down, it's amazing, I want to touch down on the point you mentioned in our last show. You were speaking about, we were touching down on how some of the blacks here in this country or other people may feel like they're not even able to be Muslim without being Arab. Yeah. Or, you know, some people have that misunderstanding, so shall we say. So what do you think is the solution to that particular issue right there? What do you think we can do to make people more aware that no, you can be a Muslim.
Yeah, I feel like everything has to be practical. I think it's okay for us to have, predominantly black masajids, and predominantly Asian masajids, predominantly, Arab masajids, and for us then to go in this masjid of a 90% ratio of Arabs, Asians, or blacks, and start telling them that Islam is this and we have to be together. When you're talking to a predominantly 90%, one race of people, until you start to mix and until you start to share, until you start to integrate within your own community. Because we have a problem here as Muslims in the West, that we're told to integrate with the wider society in terms of dealing with the non-Muslims and being a part of everyday society and culture, when we're yet to integrate within ourselves as a Muslim community. So until we do that, we're going to have a problem with doing what we need to do with the wider community as a whole. And sometimes you'd find that on the flip note of that, sometimes as Muslims, we might find it easier to integrate with non-Muslims than to integrate with other Muslims of different race and culture and backgrounds, and that becomes problematic. So you'd find that Mr. A at work can smile and laugh and grin and share jokes with Mr. B, who's from a different nationality and background, but he's not Muslim, and he doesn't have that problem because he kind of understands that the barrier between us is our faith, and that I don't have to put full trust in you to have my back like that in terms of the mindset. But with a Muslim, he's your brother. He's chained with you by faith, and your trust should be your life. Should be that, you should be able to leave your children with him. You should be able to leave, your possessions with him, and that are beloved to you, and feel safe. But when an individual has that barrier of racism that makes them feel like, I can't trust this guy, I would never leave my kids with him, I couldn't leave no money with him, it's like your loved possessions are not, entrusted with those that are meant to be closest to you.
So you would say one of the solutions to the issue is making sure that we mix.
We have to.
Shouldn't be.
It's not an issue because
this masjid.
No, it shouldn't.
This masjid where it's just
people
are segregated.
Yeah, you find in non-Muslim communities, ethnic minority communities, where people are living in certain groups on certain estates, you'd find that it's easy for a white parent to be saying, I'm going to be late from work today, and ringing up her black neighbor to look after her kids. Absolutely. Or it's easy for the Asian, non-Muslim, living on that same council estate to ring up her black neighbor or her white neighbor. You find that, for some reason they've started to deal with these issues, but for us,
so they're throwing it out and we're rushing to pick it up.
We're rushing to pick it up. So I feel like we need to find a balance, and we need to find some solutions. It's easy also to blame the parents. I feel as youngsters, in terms of, when we find scenarios of, youngsters trying to get married into other cultures, and they feel like, my parents won't allow me to get married because he's not black, or he's not white, he's not Asian. And I feel it's easy to understand that as racism rather than preference. Right. Some parents have preferences, and it's not the same as being racist. Some parents, say, I don't mind you marrying out of our community and our race, or whatever it may be.
So would you say also, because we know, as we know, and it's not something, of course, that everybody has to practice, but would you say also, we know this was a sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to marry into different tribes to bring the hearts of the people together. So we know this is also another common solution. And as we mentioned before, dealing with the salah.
And I feel like
when you're praying next to someone,
of course,
you're praying next to someone from Asia or from Europe or wherever you're from, when you're praying feet to feet, shoulder to shoulder, it's very difficult. As you mentioned also, eating with the people. All of this is mixing, praying, eating together. These things are bringing the hearts together.
It's very important, and I feel like some of the points that you touched on in terms of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu marrying from different tribes to bring the people together, it was one that the Prophet, done actions that were inducive to that environment. That environment was, was an acceptance to what was going to take place. It was never a burden on an environment. They were willing to do so. And you also find times where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would want to leave somebody over a community of people, and he'll say, how can I leave such and such over this community? They'll never accept him. And it's not because, and he would leave someone from their tribe or someone from their cultural background to lead over them, because these people, they won't accept it. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ knows that this is not to say that this is what we propagate in terms of, Islam, and that because they want to accept it, that we have to follow their route. But be easy on them. It's, be easy on the community. If you know, example, that there's a community of brothers and they need some type of leadership or some type of guidance, and you have 3 brothers to pick from. So we have a community here, it's a black community, and they need some type of guidance with their youth, and you have 3 brothers. You have an Asian brother, a white brother, and a black brother. And you know that this community is hard-headed. They are Muslim brothers, but they're hard-headed. If I send them the Asian and the white brother, they might not accept it. So we send them the black brother, not to say that we're trying to make racism or that easier for them, but it's just to be easy on them.
Absolutely.
Just to
making it easy for them.
And that's it. And sometimes I feel like when we find that when family members or communities are trying to make things easy for a community because just the environment that we live in is not conducive to what we're trying to practice at the time, some people again are quick to label it as racism. But I feel that we got to be mature about racism. We got to be mature about, because if we keep on crying wolf, when the wolf comes, no one ain't gonna believe us.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we need to really.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we need to go back to the Quran and Sunnah. We need to go back to looking how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with it. We need to take more guidance also from our elders that have been on this planet a longer time than we have and have been dealing with it for a long time. And we need to be balanced in terms of how we deal with the issue of racism.
In fact, and that what you just said, referring back to the elders and even referring back to the people of that land, this is one of the issues that we face in America. And I truly believe when we practice Islam, as all of us have mentioned, and I've experienced this, like I was used to being around all different types of people, but the mere practice of Islam has washed even those subtle things that may have been in their hearts.
That's it.
So ultimately, I feel like the true practice of Islam should remove racism from the hearts of the people.
That's it.
Because we know that those are traces of Jahiliyyah and they have nothing to do with Islam.
That's true.
So I feel like the main solution, whether it's in the salah, whether we're eating together, whether we're intermarrying when it's not too much of a burden,
Yeah.
and when you feel like the cultural barrier won't be an issue for you, intermarrying. This brings the hearts together. Because as you mentioned, this allows you to experience different cultures. Get to see how different people eat, how they speak, how they interact with one another. You learn.
That's it.
And that veil becomes removed. You don't have these stigmas no longer in your mind,
True.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
It's true. There's many aspects that we can touch on in terms of how we can kind of bring communities together. And I feel like step by step, communities got to embrace that challenge and that change. And they got to embrace that working together. They got to embrace that, like you said, eating food that you might not be used to, sitting with people that you might not be used to.
You can't just be eating your own food all the time.
So I
man,
feel like these things do bring a big change. And I would say that, living in the West, we can't say it's all, like doom and gloom. Being able to grow up in this type of multicultural environment has allowed Islam to, the Muslims here, to teach the Muslims back in Muslim countries a lesson, to learn, because as a whole, we do integrate well compared to those that live in the subcontinent of Asia and Africa and in the Arabian Peninsula. We are, as a whole.
Alhamdulillah, Brother Musa. I want to thank you once again for coming on and touching down on the subject. As you know, we're out of time. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, we did our best. We did our best. And I hope, inshallah ta'ala, someone out there can take some lessons from this, inshallah ta'ala. Once again, tune in with us again on Have Your Say. I'm your host, Brother Omar Dubois, and I'm going to leave you with a salam. And brothers and sisters, tune in again, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.